Homelessness. It's one of America's best epidemics. Sleeping on park benches, drinking gasoline, and committing insurance fraud just to be able to pay the bills. It's not as fun as it sounds. But what if you could become a millionaire instead? That's what we'll be doing, because we have big ambitions. This is a business management simulator that allows you to financially and spiritually enrich yourself by exploiting your employees and being an all-around ruthless maniac. Our goal? Accumulate $1 million in our bank account or die trying. Let's begin. Much like God, we have to start by creating ourselves. After editing a few hairstyles and changing the color of my pants, we created the ultimate business magnate, Conrad Murray. Time to get to work, Conrad. Clearly this game has a twisted sense of humor because the first line of dialogue you see is, "It's been 3 months since Grandma died." I'll summarize. Basically, Conrad is homeless in New York City, but luckily his rich Uncle Fred has decided to share some business knowledge in order to help him survive. Fred will be our guide through these hard times, and his first decree is to get an apartment. So I had Conrad take the most direct route, which is running down the middle of the road while trying to avoid oncoming traffic. You see, my philosophy is that if someone wants to hit you with their car, they're going to. However, where are they going to be looking for potential victims? It's the sidewalk, exactly. Now, they'll never be expecting us in the middle of a 4-lane highway at 3 a.m., and that makes it the safest option. Anyway, we arrived at the apartment. Apparently it's worth $26 million, but that didn't stop Conrad from trying to buy it for 15. His offer was viciously rejected. Absolutely humiliating, but entirely calculated. This would serve as Conrad's rock bottom moment, from which he will rise like a financial phoenix. But for now, I decided to just rent the apartment for $44 a day. You might be wondering what $1,300 gets you in New York City, and here's your answer. Roughly 300 square feet and no running water. I could assume this is meant to be a bathroom, but the lack of a toilet makes that a terrifying reality to consider. I had Conrad sleep for 7 hours to replenish his energy meter, and we set out to the appliance store to buy ourselves a fridge. After sprinting down the street and dodging traffic, we arrived at the store, but unfortunately it wasn't open for several hours. So I had Conrad sleep at the bus stop to pass some time. Finally, they let us in. Conrad approached a full-sized fridge and somehow condensed it into a medium cardboard box. Amazing. The only issue is, it's very expensive. Clearly, it's time to use my superpower, moral bankruptcy. I had Conrad steal the fridge and sprint through a 4-lane intersection during rush hour all the way back to his apartment. It was terrifying, but we got the fridge. In my business, this is what we call pure profit. We then stopped by the grocery store to purchase some food. I can't risk Conrad being banned from this establishment since it could mean starvation, so as much as it hurts me, we're going to pay for the food. Additionally, Uncle Fred is gatekeeping his financial wisdom from us until we can generate $300 on our own, so Conrad applied for a job at the grocery store. They hired him on the spot. Clearly, this manager knows a fellow businessman when he sees one. It's 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, and our shift doesn't start for another 20 hours. However, Conrad is such a workhorse, I had him physically remove the other cashier from their till, and we started working an entire 20 hours ahead of schedule. No, we're not being paid for this, but the grind never stops. Conrad performed unpaid labor for 6 hours before I decided to let the other cashiers have their job back. But not for long. We went around the corner and found a bench to sleep on for 12 hours straight, waking up perfectly on time for our first shift. After 7 hours of work, Conrad generated $175. Also, I'm not sure if this is important, but we didn't pay tax on any of that, which makes me believe this may be an illegal grocery store. Regardless, now that we technically have employment, we can trick the bank into giving us a loan. Conrad sprinted down the road and into a surprisingly claustrophobic financial institution. I was still getting used to the controls at this point, and so Conrad kind of stumbled around the office as if he had taken too many Quaaludes, but eventually he found his seat. Clearly, the banker was impressed that we had survived this long without any motor skills whatsoever because he decided to loan us $15,000. Now, with tremendous debt, Conrad is prepared to do 2 things: quit his job after 1 day and start his own business empire. Uncle Fred suggested a gift shop, which seemed reasonable. Conrad found a place to rent out, and so our first business was born. Dumb shit, a gift shop for the masses. And as soon as we signed the rental agreement, Uncle Fred called us to congratulate us on the purchase. I found this strange because 1, it's 1:30 a.m., and 2, how could Uncle Fred possibly know the exact moment when we rented this random obscure building in the middle of New York City? Come to think of it, I've never actually seen Uncle Fred, and our relation is dubious to say the least. It's at this point we have to consider that Uncle Fred might not be real. I suspect Uncle Fred is a coping mechanism Conrad has created to help him come to terms with the existential nihilism of existence in a post-capitalist society. Basically, Uncle Fred is Brad Pitt from Fight Club. This has huge implications because the next thing Fred tells us to do is to go get his car from up the street. Conrad found the car and drove away in it. However, assuming Fred isn't real, this is just a random person's car and we have committed Grand Theft Auto. Regardless, we now have a car, and I for one am interested to see if driving is any easier than walking. Definitely not. Got it. We waited until sunrise, at which point I had Conrad purchase some business supplies. With some shelves and a cash register, we can now furnish our gift shop. Conrad perpendicular parked his car and started unloading the goods. By the time we finished decorating, there was a 9-car long traffic jam, including ambulances, centered around Conrad's car. They're in luck though, because now we're leaving to buy our final supplies from an Alibaba clearance store. Conrad decided to smash his car into the storefront to show them just how much of an enthusiastic businessman he is. He picked up some cheap gifts and paper bags and loaded them into the car. The only issue is, we managed to lock ourselves out of our own car. It's nudged too tightly against the subway entrance and Conrad refuses to enter via the passenger seat. This is very unfortunate. At this point, a lesser man may have placed a gun in his mouth, but not Conrad. He's the businessman of steel. He elected to carry the boxes all the way back to his store while sprinting through oncoming traffic. After all, how heavy can 200 novelty gifts be? Conrad ran for hours on end. We started in bright sunny weather, but now the street lights are turning on and I'm getting worried someone might mug us for our office supplies. It took us 6 hours, but we were finally on the last box, only 40 meters away from our store, and suddenly Conrad collapses. We passed out from exhaustion in the middle of a 4-way intersection, only to wake up 8 hours later in a hospital bed. Where is this hospital, you may ask? 600 meters away. Fucking excellent. At least we still have our box. The hospital charged Conrad $2,000, which is maybe a fair price for saving us from being hit by an 18-wheeler, but I'm Canadian, so it still feels kind of wrong. Anyway, now revitalized and rejuvenated by the wonders of private healthcare, Conrad began his journey back to the gift shop. Our store is now stocked and dumb shit can officially open for business. What are the hours of operation? All of them. Only an amateur business would even consider the concept of closing. Conrad manned the till and prepared for his first 24-hour shift. He made it about 12 hours straight with no lunch break before entering a state of exhaustion which precluded him from continuing work. I didn't want Conrad to end up in the hospital again, and so I had him wander down the road in his mindless delirium, searching for a park bench to recover his stamina. During this time, I also realized that we have several text messages from the city of New York informing us that we are being ticketed $125 every day that our car remains illegally parked. Since Conrad can't get in the car to move it, he'll be paying $125 every day for the rest of his natural life. To say this crippled my morale was an understatement. Anyway, we eventually found our way back to the apartment and slept for a few hours. Conrad completed this cycle of suffering for the next few days. We were making money, but this is no way to live. We need to outsource this suffering to someone else. I let Conrad off work early today so he could go to a recruitment office to try to find some people to hire. Unfortunately, he collapsed in traffic again and we woke up at the hospital. Undeterred, we ran back to the recruiting office and placed an order for one employee between the ages of 15 and 31. I decided on this age range because I feel it will be easier to convince a 15-year-old that 24-hour shifts are normal in the adult world. The recruiting agency called us back the next day and we officially had our first employee, Jason Hughes. He wants $15 an hour and part-time work. Let me tell you one thing, Jason. You will never see your family ever again. We hired him immediately, designed a work uniform, and scheduled his hours for the week. He's working 168 hours a week for the next calendar year. Our first business is now operational, and it started pulling in a few $100s for us each day. All we have to do is keep it stocked with supplies. Fortunately, I was able to steal a hand truck from the supply store to make these trips a little faster. Why Conrad has such powerful and energetic shoulder movements when using this, I am not sure. The next thing Conrad did was go back to the recruiting agency and place a bulk order for more recruits over the next 10 days. I'm not sure how long a human being can survive working 168 hours a week without sitting, so we better have plenty of replacements lined up. After this, we went to the local business college to take a course on business administration. Conrad, being the absolute powerhouse he is, studied for 13 hours straight and again woke up in the hospital. That's when we got this message from Jason. Apparently he's calling in in sick after working for only 120 hours straight. This generation is clearly useless. You know, Jason, I once didn't eat or sleep for 48 hours, and when I did wake up, it was under general anesthesia at the hospital. Actually, that happens quite a lot. You really have to grow up if you want to make it in this adult world. Either way, we have replacements lined up, so I decided to fire Jason for neglecting his work. Dumb shit has settled into a nice pattern of profit, and it's time for Conrad Murray to open his second business venture, a hamburger store. And with that, 2 doors down from dumb shit, beef and nothing else is born. Unfortunately, no one likes hamburgers in this town, and we're losing money. It might be due to the fact that we have no freezers whatsoever, and the same 100 burgers have been on that grill for the past 3 days. Conrad spent weeks trying to make this business work. He even initiated a 47-car long traffic jam in the middle of New York City in protest against the fact that no one was eating his burgers. This was not a fruitful endeavor, and eventually our 20 parking tickets even caused us to go into a brief period of bankruptcy. Clearly, this isn't working, and a good businessman knows when to give up. I had the health department condemn beef and nothing else so we could rebrand ourselves under a different name. Conrad acquired a building in a more trafficked part of town, and we began our relaunch. It was at this point I realized you can actually import your own files for your store's logo. This is good. Since beef and nothing else failed so horribly, I turned to my friend for some advice on branding. He provided me this image to use as our new mascot. Apparently his name is Golgoroth, and with that we now have a jewelry store called Golgoroth's Treasure. Conrad stocked it with the cheapest and most asbestos-ridden jewelry he could find, and eventually we started turning a consistent profit from both businesses. At this point, I spent about 1 in-game month optimizing the performance of our stores and creating the ideal business model that Conrad could use to create dozens of successful businesses across town. Basically, it goes like this. Identify an in-demand and underserviced industry, rent a building with a good traffic score, rent a warehouse, buy a flamboyant pink delivery van, hire several delivery drivers, rent office space, hire a logistics manager, and finally cut out the middleman by traveling to the docks to import bulk shipments of goods directly from China. Then we have to work in reverse. Have the goods sent to your warehouse, tell your logistics manager which stores need what supplies, and then they have your delivery drivers drop off the supplies to your stores every morning. Once that chain of command is set up, you've effectively automated 95% of the operation of your store. I took a while to figure this out, and Conrad had to take out about $50,000 in personal loans. With so much debt hanging over our head, it is now time to enter a period of hyper-frugality. For example, I've started firing all of my employees that ask for more than $18 an hour. Additionally, on day 29, I evicted Conrad from his apartment, and he's been living in a company van ever since. Sometimes it makes him depressed, but not having a fixed address really helps us avoid loan sharks. Fortunately, we managed to stabilize our finances by day 50, and we're now making between $3,000 and $7,000 each day. Armed with this knowledge, Conrad rapidly expanded his business empire. More warehouses, more storefronts, more depressed people working in offices, and of course, more money. By day 100, Conrad had expanded his business empire to include cigars, wine, donuts, cheap clothing, and we even own a bunch of lawyers. Basically, if it could be made with child labor, Conrad Murray is selling it. We are making money hand over fist. $20,000 a day became the norm. According to these numbers, it would only take about a month to generate $1 million and complete our challenge. Now, someone with a fully developed frontal lobe would probably decide to just sit around and let the checks roll in, but me, I decided to double down. You see, Conrad has been reading this book. It's called The Secret, and it talks about the power of manifestation. Basically, it tells us that you can have as much money or success as you want as long as you ask the universe for it.
What?
The book is conveniently sparse on what that actually means, but Conrad is sold. I decided to manifest more money for Conrad by going to every bank in the city and requesting the maximum loan they could offer. This amounted to a total of $900,000. I then had Conrad return to the bank and invest all of his money in the highest risk stock I could find. Shoelaces. It's time to find out if this manifestation thing really works. If it does, by tomorrow our investment will go up, and if it doesn't, we are going to jail. Conrad slept on a park bench for 24 hours, and when he woke up the next day, we checked the stock market. Our investment went up 0.002%. Manifestation works. This revelation caused Conrad to experience 6 million years of human evolution over the course of about 12 seconds. His neurons began rapidly dividing, and each of his brain brain cells swole to the size of watermelons. His consciousness grew to multiversal levels, and he witnessed the dawn and destruction of humanity millions of times across all dimensions. Every fiber of his being screamed out as he slowly dissociated from this corporeal realm. The human vessel was not meant to contain this much power, and Conrad is transforming into something much, much more. Conrad is now retarded.
I owe the banks a lot of money, but little do they know, I just learned about manifestation. I don't need the old gods anymore. I answer to no one. Everything is mine, thanks to manifestation.
Honestly, this experience with manifestation has made me realize some things about business. If you want to see results, you need to take risks. That's why I decided to double down again. I cashed out of the stock market, which made us an entire $1,400 by the way, and invested all of it into purchasing or renting every building on 4th Street. After 2 months, Conrad had established 18 fully functional and profitable businesses on 4th Street. We're now making $150,000 per day, and it only took 7 days for us to generate $1 million, thereby completing our challenge. You may be wondering where Uncle Fred is in all of this. Well, some weeks ago he gave us the most impossible challenge of all: achieve 100% happiness. In order to do this, Conrad will need to redeem himself from his greatest embarrassment, his failed hamburger store. Conrad will find his redemption by creating the most popular fast food restaurant in New York City. There's only one way to do this, and a lot of people are going to have to die, but that's a small price to pay for absolution. You see, in each of these cars is a person, and each person has money. I want the money. But the issue with capitalism is that people can choose what to do with their money. And in fact, they can choose not to give it to Conrad Murray at all. That's a problem, and we are about to manifest a solution. But first, we're going to need more money. At present, we have about $1.5 million, much of which actually belongs to the bank. I had Conrad charter a boat to international waters to engage in tax-free gambling. He approached the roulette table with the confidence of someone who had just inhaled 3 pounds of Colombian energy supplements, and he bet $1.5 million on black. It rolled, and it spun, and Conrad won. Amazing, we now have $2.6 million. Let's do it again. Red this time. And another win. Conrad is clearly some kind of probability manipulating metahuman, and we sailed back to New York now with $4.5 million in our bank account. I then had Conrad go to every car dealership in town and buy every single car they had. This took several weeks to do, but eventually we managed to accumulate an armada of 75 trucks, 200 vans, 150 sedans, and 25 18-wheelers, all of which were strategically hidden in several warehouses and parking lots across the city. Why have I done this? Well, consider this. Almost all of our businesses are located on 4th Street. The plan is to have Conrad strategically park hundreds of cars across New York to block access to every street except 4th. If I do this just right, I'll be able to create a funnel that condenses all traffic in New York City directly onto 4th Street. By depriving the American people of their basic freedoms and autonomy, we stand to increase our profits substantially. I know, you're not sold, but the plan doesn't end there. You see, I've spent the past 3 months stockpiling food supplies in my warehouses. We have 200,000 donuts and 600,000 cups of coffee. This matters because I'm going to use my fleet of 18-wheelers to block off all access into or out of the city, thus trapping everyone inside. The hospitals will be blocked, and so will the docks to prevent the import of food and medicine. The people will be imprisoned and growing hungrier by the hour. Since the only accessible restaurant will be my donut shop, the people of New York will have no choice but to submit to Conrad Murray as their new overlord. It's either that or their society descends into cannibalistic anarchy. It took me a week of planning to figure out the logistics behind this and another month to actually do it. But slowly, car by car, truck by truck, we managed to strangle the city of New York down to a singular street that leads directly to our donut shop. People are unable to even access their homes, and since I've barricaded all basic amenities with my convoy of freight trucks, the citizens of New York will have no option but to turn to Conrad Murray for food, clothing, and shelter. Oh, and guess what? The price of a single donut just hyperinflated to $800. By selling 200,000 donuts at $800 a piece, Conrad will generate $160 $60 million of revenue. This is the monopoly every entrepreneur dreams of. 70-car-long pileups, countless collisions, and emergency services basically don't exist. This is the closest thing to the purge these people will ever experience. Technically, it is costing Conrad $56,000 a day in parking tickets, but honestly, you can't put a price on happiness. Having taken an entire city hostage and forced its inhabitants to patronize our stores, I feel as though Conrad has completed not only the challenge, but his purpose in life. Conrad is now prepared to ascend to a higher plane of existence. This unmitigated influx of profits has caused Conrad to enter a state of quantum criticality, and his physical body underwent a supernova. As mysteriously as he appeared, he is now gone. I want to thank my supporters on Patreon for making these videos possible, and finally, thank you for watching.